Okay, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I can hear a difference. However, quick bit of preface, I didn't get this plugin early, I purchased it myself. It is not sponsored in any way by FabFilter. Format for the video, really simple. We're gonna go over the new features in Pro Q4, and then we're gonna look at some practical applications for each of those new things. If you are looking to pick it up, in the description below, there'll be a few 10% off discount codes, but they are single use, so once they're gone, they're gone. Otherwise, there is a deal on at Plugin Boutique, which is a channel affiliate, but I'll link that down below as well in case you miss out on any of those 10% offs. Let's get to it. All right, so the first thing that I want to highlight is if you're upgrading to 4 from either the previous, say you've been on Q2 for the last 10 years, or Q3, it doesn't overwrite it. It is a whole new plugin, even though it's an update. So it does mean all your old projects, you're able to have both Q4 and Q3 open together. No problems there. I feel that's a really important thing to highlight. Let's go over the actual feature side of things now. GUI wise, across the top is pretty much different. Apart from it says 4 up here. We've got our undo and redo, our AB and our copy settings. We're now able to copy particular parameters as well and copy them over to other instances, which is really useful. We've then got our preset browser and a whole stack of new presets. I generally won't start with a preset, especially as now we've got this new feature to draw in the rough curve that we're after. If you're looking for something in particular, we can now hit search and we can type in the likes of vocal. Right next to it, we have help. If we hover over this, it provides details for any of the features. Once you're really familiar with this, you'll probably turn this off. To have it on by default is really useful because it means we can do things like this. If we hover over here, it will give us the information on what that button does, making it way easier for you to learn and get familiar with how Pro Q works. As we can see here, this is our full screen button. Our full screen button's kind of cool because it allows us to have a full screen analyzer of the track that we're playing. And we can see a full screen version of that going right there. To get rid of it, we can press escape or click on the icon up here again. This main window here is our whole EQ window, but it's important to note we've got this 12 dB scale here, and this is the scale of the EQ. By default, it's 12 dB. We can zoom right in, so 3 dB. So this is only a 3 dB cut here, but it looks huge and takes the full scope of the EQ. If we're having to do some really extreme EQ, we can put it on 30. And now we can see curves all the way beyond minus 30 dB or plus 30 dB should we need it. If we want to refresh our tool, we've got default settings at the bottom. And if we hover over the icon, it automatically selects default for us, which will just give us a clean EQ. In here, we've got a frequency spectrum. We'll look at that in just a moment. On the main window here, this is where we can add any of our EQ points. They're smart in terms that if you click low, double click low, we'll get a high pass, double click high, we'll get a low pass. We go a little bit further in, we get a shelf, and we can see those are represented with an icon just above. And anywhere in the mid section here will automatically bring in bell curves for us. If we hover over a point and move up or down, it will create the representative curve or filter type there for us. And if we push beyond the scope of what we were zoomed into, it will zoom out to the 30 for us there, or zoom back in if capable. This little icon down here enables or disables EQ Sketch. And we'll look at EQ Sketch in just a moment as part of the new features. Here we'll bring down our keyboard. As you can see, this allows us to pick out any note. So if there's a particular note in a track or you're trying to find the key of something, this can be really useful. So for example, if I want to have a point that gets A2, because A2 is sticking out in my mix, I can double click the piano roll here and I'll get the exact frequency that A2 would be sat at, and I can carve it away like so. Enabling MIDI learn allows us to link one of our controls up, so we can switch MIDI learn on and adjust controls on our keyboard and link them to parameters on Pro Q if you want to set up like that. You can use the drop down here to disable MIDI entirely if we want revert or save our settings. Zero latency mode is in here by default. We can switch it into our natural phase or our linear phase EQ modes here. Here is the name of the bus we were on. So I added Pro Q4 here to the drums bus and it is named it drums. If I want to though, I can now double click in here and it will open up the instance list, and we'll look at how that works in just a moment. To exit the instance list, we press on the cross just up here. It brings us back to our full version. We've then got our analyzer. It says pre-post SC. That currently means it's going to show the frequency analysis for the pre-process signal, the post-process signal, and any sidechain coming in. Depending on what we want to see, we can enable or disable these across the top. Highlighted means they're currently active and it will display there what's going on. If we need to change the range or weighting or resolution, that's all in here for us as well, such as the EQ tilt. I leave it on 0. Some people like to have a 1.5 or a 3 dB per octave weighting on that. It's whatever you're used to reading. This enables the spectrum grab. This was available in Q3, but is a very useful tool, and I'll show you how to use that shortly. And this is our collision meter, whereas if we've got 2 channels showing, we can see any frequency overlap in there, and we'll have a look at using that with the dynamics and the spectral balance shortly. And then freeze allows us to freeze our overall spectrum. As you can see, it's frozen what we've got in there currently. Here is a new module allowing us to add subtle or warm analog emulation. I haven't heard this yet, but we will try it out on something, probably vocals, later in the video. This is a complete bypass. It will bypass the entire plugin. And this is our gain adjustment here. This allows us to pan left and right and adjust the gain. We can do phase inversion here. We can do auto gain enabled, which is really useful if we are doing overall dynamic control. I generally don't use it and prefer to manually gain if needed. I find that the auto gain will often end up pushing things a little too loud. However, I haven't tried it in full yet. And we can also disable our meter here as well. And lastly, the 2 arrows here allow us to adjust the overall size of Pro Q. By default, I've always had it on large, so let's move to that. So let's go over the new features. The first thing to have a look at is the new Sketch EQ. Now, initially when I saw this, it was only yesterday I initially saw this, I thought this was kind of gimmicky. I'm still not exactly swayed on it, but let's say I know on my drums bus as it's playing back, I want to cut this away. I can now, in theory, just draw that rough EQ curve in, and it will make that for me with the boost up here and the cut. I would arguably just do this. And that would be a lot quicker. Like, I accidentally put that bump in before. Yeah, I don't know how often I'll be using that yet, but it works very, very simply. If you do not wish to use it, we can disable it with this just here. Switch it on. It seems to be relatively smart in that, you know, we can do things like that. We can immediately draw in other curves that we couldn't draw before. We can re-enable it and draw another kind of curve in, but it undoes what we initially put in. So it's like a one-use kind of thing. I don't know personally how useful I'm going to find that, but that is how it works, and that is how to enable it and disable it. The next thing to look at is the instance mode. And like I showed you before, if we double click on drums right here, it now takes us to the instant view. Over here on the right hand side, we can scroll through all of the different views, and each one's named in the bottom left hand corner. We can just scroll on the screen as well. The slider up the top here adjusts how many we can see at once. And I'd say what's very nice here is, depending on how zoomed in it is, it zooms in on any that you have selected. If we zoom it all the way in, then they remain as is. We can search for any particular one. So if I put in drums, it will find the drums for me. If we look for Vox, it will find the Vox for me, and it filters everything else out in a really nice way. Now, if I play back the track, and I'll unmute everything, but turn the volume down, we can make adjustments to any channel from this view. So for example, I can see that there's some low end that I don't necessarily want creeping in on this Vox channel. I could use this new Smart EQ drawing option and just curve that out like so, and it will draw that in and EQ it on that channel for me, which is very, very powerful. Maybe I want to isolate this string section. I can draw that like so and just dial it in on that channel as well. Now let's say I want to go back to my drums. I can click over here. Oh. Let's say I want to go back to my drums. I can close this and we're back on the drums bus right here. In my pre-post and SC, my visualizer option right here, let's turn on collision. And we can now see potential collisions happening with the kick drum, as we would expect. Really common to happen, right? I'm just going to solo the drums again so we can talk comfortably. If we now double click on drums again, go into our view here, we'll see that the collision meter is now displaying for everything. Even though we've only switched it on in this one instance, because we're viewing from this instance, we're able to see those collisions happening on everything else, which is really useful. It shows us all those overlapping frequency points in our mix. We've got a representation up here, but this is where our collision meter is coming from. Okay, so we can see from this meter here, all of these different areas of collisions potentially masking on all these other tracks in these areas. How incredibly useful is that? Now let's go back into our drums view again. And we're going to have a quick look at this. It's an old feature from Q3, but if you're only just coming over and this is the first time looking at Pro Q, it's really important to note. If we want to find a key note or a key point that's sticking out in the sound, we can switch this on right here, hover over our frequency, and it will freeze for us, and it will start showing us those key points that are poking up. Let's say in our drums here, we can identify now that that 2.2 kilohertz was poking out a bit much. Let's highlight it, open it up so it's really easy to hear. It's now highlighting that that was a little bit of a harsh area, that was poking through in the mix more than anything else. We can make the little super subtle correction to bring it down, but now we can do something else in that if we isolate that frequency by hovering over here and pressing on the headphone icon, let's open it up a touch. We can just use the mouse wheel to do that. We can hear there's maybe a little harshness on in there, but not anything that would be a problem. However, when I listen back to this drum mix, there is something that I'd identify as a problem. Maybe you agree with me, but the cymbal's got a bit of a pa 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 type sound to it. Can you hear that? So let's use this again, and let's find that sound. I think it's going to be lower down around the 1K. It's right there, isn't it? It's a little bit below where that initial point came out. We can now take this band and control that far more subtly with some Spectral EQ. We're going to change and make this band spectral. And you can see what's going on there with that representation. The easiest way I can explain spectral to you is imagine 1,000 EQ bands all really narrowly dialed in, and each one responds individually to a very small group of frequencies rather than the overall thing like a dynamic EQ would. Maybe there's someone else who can explain it in much better with a detail, with a much better analogy. It'll probably be Dan Morrill, won't it? Now, what we can do here, when this is in spectral mode, and this is our icon here on our details to show us this is in spectrum mode, we can open it up like we were able to with dynamic EQ and control it in much the same ways. But we've got two new controls here. We've got attack and release. Yes! They're also there for us when we switch to. They're also there for us when we're on dynamics. Winner. Let's make spectral. So the more we pull this threshold down, the more it's able to use the spectral EQs to pull to the overall curve that we've given it here. If I give this 6 dB of room, it's now going to pull it down the full 6 dB. If I release the headroom, it's now got 6 dB to work with, but it's only going to use a small amount. It's relative to the space it's got. So at the minute, it's pulling it down about 3 dB, so about half of the range I've given it. If I give it less of a range at about 3 dB, it will pull it down about 1.5 dB. Again, making use of the range it's got relative to the overall curve. Now this slider here is the spectral density. Remember how I said it's like lots of different dynamic EQ points pulling down? The more dense it is, the more individual frequencies can be pulled down. So if we pull it all the way to 0, it's much broader. If we pull it all the way to the right, it's much more detailed and narrow. Now the attack or release in the center, so the 50% mark, is same as the auto mode, as if we had this window closed. Putting it to the left makes the attack faster, pushing it to the right slows it down. Same for the release. Now this can work in the inverse of pulling frequency down. In this instance, I've used it to try and tame some of that symbol, and we're going to focus on doing that in just a sec. But the way I like to identify what's being picked up is actually to push it this way. If I give this a really slow release and make it quite extreme, now I can be really aware of what this is pulling up. Bringing a lot of the hi-hat, let's bring a lot of the shaker body, but it's also bringing a lot of that cymbal with it, a lot of what I want to control. So let's give this up to 3 dB of room to take it away. Let's dial it in so it can use up to that amount. Now it's really fast-paced drums. I'm going to dial in an approximately fast attack. I think the auto response there seems to be fine, but maybe a little bit quicker. I'm going to bring that threshold down a touch more. In terms of how wide the band is, we can use our mouse wheel to adjust it while we're listening. I think that's doing quite a good job there. Now this is maybe a little extreme, I would definitely A and B this, but let's just have a listen to how much it's actually taking out. Focus on the P of that symbol. It's a lot more overpronounced now. That gives it just a little bit of control. I would certainly want to dial that in a little bit more, A and B it, and listen to it in context. Now they've also added some analog emulation. Back in the day, rewind 5 years, I would have been all over this. I lived on that kind of stuff, using channels and EQs and everything that all had the analog emulation flavour. I just don't do it anymore. I just fell out of love with it. Odd tape emulation, a little bit of flavour here and there, but as a general thing, nah. The only one that I still reach for is the UAD Pultec EQ on the regular, just for some beautiful air. It does a fantastic job for that. And if we can get something similar out of this, maybe it'll replace that. However, what we do to enable these, we have subtle. It says it's highly program dependent and it is dependent per band as to what you get. But let's try and give these drums a little bit of extra lift, and maybe let's overdo it a touch with about 6 dB and lift it right up. And let's have a listen between clean, subtle and warm and see what we get. I'm not struck by a huge world of difference. What about a bit of a bump up here? Warm seems to be adding a lot more extra harmonics. Not particularly great here, I've chosen a terrible spot. This is just making it kind of boxy. Subtle, I can hardly tell the difference. Okay, yeah, a little bit. Again, it says subtle, that kind of makes sense. Either way, that's there. I don't know if I'll ever use it. It's a nice touch. Maybe it will save in grace on a vocal one day, who knows. We now have the option to use fractional slopes. I can show you what that means really easily. There's a reason we've had that low end wobbling on this track the whole time. So down here, I might want to get rid of this. It's minus 9 dB. There's definitely no value to that down there. But I don't want to compromise this slope of the overall low end of the drums, right? Because we're only at sort of 75 Hertz there. There's some weight down there and natural roll off that we want to keep in that. What can sometimes happen is when you put a cut in like this and you want to kind of find the right frequency, you end up having to compromise between your Q, adding a bit of a boost, getting the frequency just right, and taking too much of the roll off, and then maybe we put that to 6 and it's not enough, or we put it to 18 and it's cutting away too harshly. So click on here and we can drag and move it to where we want. Settled on about 13.1 there, didn't we? And a nice slope. Now when we click off, we have a slope of 13 dB per octave, which is going to seem minor to many of you, but there are many times where I've had to fiddle around and make that compromise and get it just in the right space with frequency because I've wanted a slightly different roll off and it's had just not quite the right effect. That is a lifesaver in those things. It seems minor, but trust me, the more and more you work on this kind of thing, you will find that useful and you will reach for it. It says the dynamic processing has been improved to introduce less distortion. What we'll do for that is in the practical section, I'll A and B a Pro Q3 with Pro Q4 and see if we can hear a difference. Got improved precision on the linear phase processing as well. We'll open up a 2-bus on the master and we'll see if we can get some clanging or ringing to happen with the old one, which honestly was incredible, versus 4 as well. We have the new filter shape, which did stump me in the original trailer. I've never bothered using an all pass like this to basically scan for phase discrepancy. I recognized that this was the phase discrepancy slope, and you can adjust it with the Q as an all pass. So you can search for phasing issues essentially using the all pass. In the best part of 20 years, I've never had to do this, but the application of it I can see, especially if you're someone who does a lot of live recording. I haven't recorded a drum kit for nearly a decade, but if you do, having multiple snare mics, you know, searching for those phase discrepancy points using an all pass, I can see that being super useful just for what I do and what I generally show here. Not a massive thing for me, but another great tool to have if you so need it, especially for the more recording engineer side of people, which thousands of you are. Yeah, great addition. And it's always nice for me to learn something new. It's been a while. As we mentioned in the GUI overview, we can now copy and paste bands as well. So if we were to make a band like this, and then we also made it dynamic and it pulled down as well, right click, copy, make a point in here, right click, paste, and there we go. Those exact settings as they were, saving us a few clicks, transferring things over. All right, let's now dive into some practical application of the new features, or Pro Q4 in general. All right, so let's look at a practical setup here on the vocal bus. We'll just use the hook part of this song here. And let's just default this. So let's have a practical look at trying to use basically everything that's new. So first things first, We don't need this low end, so let's use our little drawing functionality. And I think something like that should get rid of it, and maybe we'll want a little lift towards the high end. Not quite what I was after, but alright. Okay, let's double click and put ourselves a point in here. Have a little listen. To be honest, this is one of my sessions where I didn't use this version of the track, but it's pretty much there, and the vocals are okay, but let's try and find... There's maybe a little rough there. Let's use our frequency grab. So like 3Ks poking through, sort of around here maybe. Yeah, 3K is about where I put it and about where I said it was a bit rough. So let's go with that based on that. Let's make it a... Talking over vocals is not the way to go. Let's make it a spectral track. As you can see, it gives us a little bit of room to go in there. Let's bring that down a touch. I'm just going to leave this on auto for now, but I do want it to control it a bit more than that. And you can see it's really only trying to grab those real bits that do poke through a little bit too much. So just reducing that dynamics overall there. If we give it more density, grabs a lot more now. Nice example there. Adding that high end, while I thought it looked nice, it's too much. Maybe just a little bit of flavour there. Let's have a listen to this as well. I'm going to bump that up a touch. Make sure we're not losing anything of value. We can probably go a little bit harder, like at 18. This guy's just a real muffled bit of the vocal, but bring it down a little bit more. So I wanted to lift it up a bit. Maybe we try the subtle. Control that a bit more. Maybe give it more range. Now the harshness that I was picking up, that's pretty much nailed it there. It's taking it out as much as 6 dB at times, but only in that tiny little narrow frequency. Let's A and B, just for example. We'll A and B the whole thing, so we've got the bypass down here. Something that I don't know if it ever got through to the final version, but there's something there I'd edit out in audio where there's a little mouth click. I don't know, maybe it's in the final version of the track. If you want to listen through and try and find it, I'll link that below. So some practical application of all of those parts. I'm still not entirely sold on this, but let's have a quick listen between clean, subtle and warm and see if we can discern any use on the vocal. I don't see myself using it, but I can hear that warm could be a useful characteristic if you wanted to like do the telephone effect and then crank the warmth up. I can see it being useful in there, which again, it's in the EQ now, makes it easier to one less plugin. But so let's take our buses now and we'll solo all the buses, which means anything that wasn't bussed will get ignored, but I don't think that's anything in the hook. And let's have a look at adjusting it in context here. There's my drums bus. Now this time we're working from the vocal bus right here. We can go into here. Let's look at anything that might be conflicting with the vocals, shall we? So let's go back into our vocal channel. Let's go into our analyzer. Let's switch on right here so we can see any masking, anything that's impacting it. And it will show us here. Remember, we've got the reference up here. Is anything that could be interacting negatively with the vocals. Makes sense that the strings would potentially be in that space, right? So what we could do here is we could take this part of the vocal, if it was going to be an issue with the vocals, which, you know, it's a big body part of the vocal here. Let's put a band in here. Let's make it dynamic. At the minute, that's just being controlled by the overall strings signal itself. I'm wondering, is there a way that we can... Oh, that's cool. So you can actually move the conflict from one to the other. Didn't know that. Yeah, is there a way that we can just open up this one? No, so we'd have to open up the strings EQ itself by the looks of things. And let's make it so the vocal side chains into that. Let's go audio. Actually, we'll do bus. We'll put the whole vocal bus into it. Which should be that one. And then this part here that's now on a dynamic, we can put that onto a side chain using this little icon just here. So it's now the vocals that pull that down instead. Alright, we can now see that represented in there. Anything else that might be conflicting? Well, the wide aux has got the vocals in it itself. So that would kind of make sense that sometimes things might pop in through, but look, there you go, we can just take that there, dip that out a little bit, should we so desire. I wouldn't necessarily recommend just working like this, by the way, but it gives you an idea. We're seeing that the keys have got a similar thing. We could open up the keys and work on those areas. I think it's super, super useful. I probably should have got rid of that on the drums. Oh look, I can do it from here. Go like that and go like that, and it's gone. So did we maybe want to duck these part of the drums back in those key moments as well? Let's do that same thing that we did before. So we can open up our Pro Q that's on the drums bus. And there's the point that we created before. Let's make this spectral. Let's bring that back. We're going to sidechain again, send the verse vocals into it. And we could sidechain the spectral control now. And it will just pull out those areas based on the conflict with the vocal. Oh my god, that's so ninja. I mean, it's potentially workflow changing, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's pretty amazing. I said I'd open up a master track and we'll have a listen to the A and B between Q3's dynamic EQ, whether it's been improved, whether we can hear any difference, and linear phase as well. All right, I've just chosen an instrumental loop to work over this so I can talk over it and not have a vocal in the way. If that's a problem, soz. And what we'll do, I'll set things up on some solid bands. So, all right, I've mimicked the two, even the same thresholds, the same Q values, etc. So in theory, Q4 is going to sound better. I've given this an extra steep slope because that's where you're most likely to hear it. Giving it a boost, giving it a pullback, all sensible ranges that you would normally use it in for the dynamics. So let's give it a bash between the two, and let's loop these 4 bars here. Okay, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I can hear a difference. However, I don't know that it's better. If you A/B them, I reckon I could tell the difference between the two, but I couldn't say A is better than B or vice versa, and I couldn't tell you which is which. But there is a difference. I'm going to trust that FabFilter are telling me 4 is doing a better thing, and perhaps when there's multiple tracks all summed together it makes more of a difference, but I will have to wait until I've gone through an entire project and really test that out. There is a difference. I can't decide if it's better. Maybe you can and can hear it and go, yeah, by far 4 sounds way cleaner and smoother, or however you want to describe it. To me, I can just tell that there is a difference, but not necessarily that it's better or worse. There you go, it is what it is. Let's try the same thing now with linear phase. That's supposed to be drastically improved. So we can just go to the bottom, we'll switch these guys into linear on both. Should be both fine on medium. And again, we'll start with Q3. If you're getting the same thing as me, now that I've put linear phase on, which honestly shouldn't be doing a whole lot, this is not necessarily used for linear phase. If I was EQing the left and right separately, I'd expect to maybe hear some differences. But for some reason, the linear phase one's brighter, like the tiny little smidge. Don't know why. Let's push this a little bit now and change these so that we're operating not just in stereo, but instead left and right as well. So we're going to have it so this is operating only on the right, and we'll do the same here. We'll have it so the mid band, and because they've got a cross overlap here, there'll be a phase discrepancy over here, is only operating on the left, the right as well. We'll do the same here. It's throwing me off that they've chosen different colours. And then we'll do the left on the low end. Now, while this isn't the perfect test, because we're doing left-right and we're doing it dynamically at a point where there's crossovers, we should hear any discernible phase differences between the left and right if we sum it to mono. So remember, we're talking through this in our output here. So on our master bus here, I'm going to go to utility and gain and pop it in mono, and it should stand out kind of drastically because we've got it in left and right. If you're on speakers, it should even be relatively obvious if something unpleasant is happening. Now Q3 was fantastic, so I don't really see a wild difference coming up, but here we go. Let's give it a bash. And for real, I can't tell the difference. So there seems to be just a tiny little bit more brightness, which you could definitely perceive as being better on Q4. It's super marginal. If you're not hearing it, focus on the like transient of the hat. Mono off, just out of curiosity. Obviously never EQ your track like this. So that has been my initial impressions and initial experience with Pro Q. I hope it's been helpful for you and giving you some kind of insight and idea on whether or not it's worth the upgrade or worth you joining the Pro Q family. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure and I look forward to seeing you guys in future videos. Take care.